today's video, we're going to learn the basics of scheduling using actual scheduling software. Now, there are tons of different scheduling programs on the market, such as Primavera P6, Microsoft Project, Procore, and many more. But regardless of which product you use, the basic fundamentals will stay the same between each product. I'm going to show you basic functionality and how to get started with creating your own schedule. So let's go. All right, if you are new to my channel, I would highly suggest starting with the first scheduling video in this series where I explain what a CPM schedule is, what the different types of scheduling relationships are, how to manually find your critical path, as well as calculating project float or slack. Again, if these terms are foreign to you, start with the playlist link in the description below, and then this video will make a lot more sense. So for today's video, we're actually going to be working in Microsoft Project. Honestly, just because it's a whole lot cheaper than purchasing Primavera P6, talking thousands of dollars. But again, they function pretty much the same, but P6 is arguably better scheduling software. So here's the startup screen for Microsoft Project. We're going to be working with a blank project file today. But before we do that, I want to quickly open this completed project or example project that I have marked right here. This is going to show us a broad overview of structuring a schedule, so we have some reference when we're going to build one from scratch. So I'm just going to double click on this plan and spec schedule complete. So I have this project broken out into three main parts. We would consider these headers, and I have them highlighted in yellow. We have pre-construction, construction, and project completion. I've separated these timelines of construction to better help organize the schedule into smaller and more manageable sections. Now, I'll explain the functionality of scheduling software later in this video, but you'll see that these are actually drop-downs if I left-click on them, showing more information. So under pre-construction, I actually have tracked contract milestones, construction milestones, and procurement or long lead items. To go one step further, if I click the drop-down on contract milestones, we'll see contract award, construction document deliverables, subcontractor bidding and scoping, subcontractor issuance, and permitting. Now, these are all individual tasks or activities, but right now they don't have any durations assigned to them, which we'll do later in this video, as well as relationships that will build the logic in this schedule. So let's collapse this contract milestones, this pre-construction header, and let's jump into our construction header. So I also have this broken down further. If there are multiple phases of construction or areas of the building, different levels or stories to the building, such as first floor or second floor, again, I'll create these subheaders kind of to isolate those tasks or activities into those areas. Now, we're going to spend the bulk of this video working in this phase one section because I actually pull these activities directly from my previous scheduling video as a continuation to show you exactly how the manual calculation would look in our scheduling software. And finally, I will always add a project completion header mainly to provide some back checks when building a schedule, because ultimately these are the dates we're working to at the end of the project. To open a building to the public, you have to have a certificate of occupancy. To get a certificate of occupancy, you need to have substantial completion, letters from the architect and the engineer. You need to get through punch list. You need to get through test and balance, and you need to get through your final MEP FP inspections. So this back check is to just show us when that final MEP FP inspection date needs to happen. So I'll actually start building from this project completion date back to this date, which will help influence the rest of the schedule on an overall schedule. We're not going to do this in this video. I'll capture this in a future video, but this is just a FYI as to how I would approach this. And finally, there are some basic schedule setup that you need to do when creating an initial schedule or a template from scratch, which I'll also cover in a future video in this series. Blank project schedules do not include holidays or working days. So you'll have to go in and kind of add these just so that your schedule logic doesn't assume that a crew is going to be working on a holiday. What this will do is kind of shorten the length of your overall schedule. So we have to pre-populate these to make sure that we're capturing non-working days or non-working hours. There's also things that you can do to set up specific calendars. If you're working two shifts on a job, it all depends on each project. So this is kind of where you would set that up. And again, I'll show you in a future video. This requires its own video to go through just the details of setting these baselines up. I'll also talk about schedule theory, how to approach a job, and start looking at drawings to build out activities. So again, all good reasons to hit that subscribe button so you're notified when I release those future videos. So I'm going to open up our blank project file, which will look like this. I can actually do a split screen in Microsoft Project so we can see our blank schedule next to our completed schedule, which is just going to help us as a reference in this video. Okay, let's start by talking about the software itself. So the layout is similar to all Microsoft projects with these different ribbons at the top. We have our file ribbon. If we click on that, we got our save as, print, export functions. You can change some baseline properties of the schedule here in this options section below. Moving on, kind of the general starting point is this task ribbon. Under this, we have different groupings such as view, clipboard, font, schedule, tasks, insert, properties, and editing. Then we have our resource ribbon here at the top. So if I click, it takes us into this next area. We have view, assignments, insert, properties, and level. So this is more so if you want to allocate specific people, crews, or cost to certain tasks. Since I primarily deal with a lot of subcontractors and don't control their labor, I rarely use this tab. Then we have the reports ribbon. So if I click in there, we see project, view reports, and export. I don't utilize this tab often either, just because it's tied back to the resources tab, which I typically don't use. Typically, I'll just build the schedule out, create the logic, the durations, and publish it from there. Moving on, we have the project tab. So this is where I would set up that general project information, such as the start date. Also, I mentioned earlier about corporate holidays. You can create specific calendars that you want to apply to different projects. Again, we're not going to get into all of that in this video, as that's not necessary right now. Finally, we have project baseline and status date. So this is what we would use to track progress against the initial project schedule that we're going to set up in this video. This also requires its own video. This is when a project is ongoing and say you're a month into the job and things are progressing along, you would use this baseline status date along with under this task tab, marking kind of percentage completion on certain tasks or activities. All right, moving on to the view ribbon. So if I double click that, again, takes us to a new section. We have task views, resource views, data, which we can filter information. We have outline, which we can use to kind of consolidate information within our schedule, zoom, split view, window, and some macros. So if I start clicking through this outline section onto our levels, you'll see that it'll somewhat consolidate this schedule down into those different headers that we were looking at earlier. So if I click level 2, it's essentially just pulling this second level of indents that we were working on. If I go one step further to level 3, it starts to expand it even further, which is that third indent level. And then finally, if I kind of just click that, it just assumes all of them, and we can see the fully expanded schedule that we'll be looking at later on. So I'm going to go up here and just click this level 4, which has most of the activities that I want to see. And for an example, if I wanted to filter down to critical tasks, I would just click on that and click critical. I'm going to collapse a couple of these because they're just repeats. And then I'm going to scroll over here just slightly just to take a look. And we can see our critical tasks, which all have 0 total slack. So if you recall from my first video, the critical path is this series of activities that have 0 slack. So I'm going to pull the old CPM schedule diagram up on the screen. And as you can see, our critical path matches. We have start, activity E, activity H, and finish. So I'm actually just going to expand the completed schedule to see what this would look like on the right side. So we have our start date, which was just plugged as 12/27/24. We have activity E duration of 10 days, which extends over here. You'll see right up above, we have a calendar that kind of corresponds. So these 10 days don't account for Saturday and Sunday, Saturday and Sunday. So we have our 10 days kind of in between as these working weeks. This activity relationship is already completed in this completed schedule. So we go from start to activity E to activity H to finish. And we kind of see this waterfall for our critical path in this area. All right, I'm going to jump back to the split screen of these schedules. So below the ribbons is our actual working space where we're going to input all the information to start building out this schedule. We can enter all the information under task name, which is where we would put our tasks or our activities. And if you recall, an activity or a task is just a specific scope of work. So we use activity A as an example on our completed schedule, but this could just really be painting or install overhead electrical. We're just using activity A as an example in this video. Now, the task mode down below has one of two options: manually scheduled or auto scheduled. We want the software to do all the work by creating the logic through these relationships that we're going to set up. And we'll add pretty much every task as auto scheduled, so it does that logic calculation for us. Now, at the bottom, it's currently set to manually scheduled. So I'm going to change this to auto scheduled. This is something that you can actually change in the file options section so that every time you open it, it's always set to auto scheduled. Now we have the task name. All right, right here. This is where we're going to type the description of the task or the header. We have task duration. This is going to be the task duration in days. We have our start date and we have our finish date. And then if I expand this a little bit further, we have a couple other columns that don't match our completed schedule, where we show early start, early finish, late start, late finish. And if I just scroll over a little bit further, our total slack. So Microsoft Project actually is very customizable in what they show you and what you can see. So if I right click on this section, I can actually just insert column. So if I just left click this insert column, all this information pops up, and these are all different columns of information that we can enter and kind of review or manipulate in our schedule. So we want early start. So if I just start typing early start, it populates right here. If I just right click there again, I can just do the early finish. If I pull this over a little bit further, this predecessor, if I want to get rid of this, I can right click it and just hit hide columns. Again, resource names, we can cover that in a future video. I'll just right click that and hide. So if I right click that, insert columns, we can do late start. As you see, it's right there. And then if I scroll over again, insert column, we can do late finish. And then the last one we want to add to match our schedule to the right is our total slack. So insert column, total slack. But again, it's all customizable. It's what you want to see. Typically, I won't even populate the early start, early finish. The only reason I'm doing this is because it relates to my previous video for manually scheduling and calculating out critical path. This is going to be a good representation of what we'll see for schedule logic, including our total float. And remember, you just need to do this setup once. You can create a schedule template. So the next time you create a project, you would just open up your save file and all this information would be pre-populated. The auto schedule would be saved as pre-populated. This is just working from a blank start. So we've got to do this on the front end to set this information all up. And then you can kind of copy this template through multiple projects, adjust a few things here and there to accommodate that specific project. So I'm going to go back to the left here, and there's actually this column that I am going to hide. The task mode, that just corresponds to the auto schedule or manual schedule. It'll just show you a different icon as to how the task is being scheduled. So we're going to hide that right now as well. And we are going to start with our task name, and then our completed. I'm just going to move this over. As you can see on this side, the task mode is still there. These are all auto scheduled. So that is what that would show. So up here, I am just going to start by typing plan and spec project example. And then I'm just going to click off this, and right away, this kind of populates some information. So what this shows is the duration of one day. This also shows Monday 10/12/09 as the start date. So the reason it shows this 10/12/09 as the start date is because this is what is set up in the beginning of the project. So if I go into project information, this start date was set as Monday 10/12/09. So by default, that's what this first day is going to show in the schedule. If I wanted to change this to the current date, I can do so, but you want to change these start dates before you start setting up your schedule. And again, we'll go into all this baseline setup in a future video. Now, if I just want to do some general color coding, I can left click here on this one. It'll highlight this entire row. You just go up to this paint bucket tool, and you can select the color that you want, and it'll fill in right there. I'm going to add 3 additional parts to our schedule, which are those pre-construction, construction, and project completion. So I'm just going to do this by just manually typing these in. Pre-construction, construction, and then project completion. So as you can see on this side, these are actually bolded, and that's because these are headers to further tasks that are underneath them. And when you have subtasks, it'll actually bold these automatically. So right now, these are all on the same indent. There's nothing nested, kind of organizing this schedule. So to change this, we can click on one of these, and we can actually go to this indent tool, and we can left click that. So then you can see that this pre-construction now kind of lives under this overall project. So if I left click and hide that, you'll see that it's kind of consolidated under that in that level or that different tier. I can left click this one and do the same thing, left click that one, and now they're all under that same top header. So if I unclick that and show them again, we can actually just multiple click or multiple highlight and do multiple at the same time. I just left click, drag, scroll down, left click, there we go. So we have pre-construction, construction, and project completion. If I want to change the color on all these at the same time, I can just highlight them all by selecting them all and then just clicking them together. All right, so let's further break down our pre-construction header to mirror our finished schedule. And if I want to add a new task in between 2 tasks, I would just right click right below it, and there's a drop down here, insert task. So I'm just going to click that, and you'll see that it'll always add a new task above that task. So I'm actually going to add a couple more, and I'm just going to right click here. It's going to add that new task above that one. If I click this one, it's just going to add it right above that. So then we have 3 blank tasks that we need to add the description to. So to add the description here, we can do a fast double click, which will open up this, which we can change the name of the task. And there's some other information in this box that we can change. So I'm going to actually cancel this, expand this, and take a look. We've got contract milestones, construction milestones, and procurement long lead. So we can double click this and I can shift this over and I can do contract milestones. Then I just click OK and it updates right there. You can also slow double click and it'll allow you to actually rename it right on the line here. So if I just highlight and erase that, I can type in construction milestone. And then last, I'm going to highlight, delete that. I'm going to type in procurement long lead. Now, again, these are not nested under pre-construction because they all share the same indent. So if I want to kind of mimic or mirror what we've got on this left side where this is kind of consolidated and organized a little neater, I'll just left click this 3, drag down, and then click this indent. So now these are all subtasks under this overall header, and we can see we can collapse and expand that. Now, I want to briefly stop here and just talk about building schedules in general before you start inputting durations and adding relationships to different tasks. You want to start by creating this overall structure, adding different areas or phases of the building, and then just listing every single activity or task you can under each of those. Once you've done that, then you can start adding your durations, adding your relationships of different activities within the schedule to create the logic. You want to do this because it's more of an information dump so that you can organize it, how you would kind of build the whole project. And then this helps consolidate some of that information into these different areas, makes you think about how you would build a level 1 to a level 2 to a level 3 in a phase sequence. And then it just keeps the overall schedule a little more organized. Okay, just an easy tip or a quick tip. You can actually copy and paste activities anywhere in the schedule, but just be careful of doing this once you've already set relationships or tracked any progress on that task or activity, because it will also copy that progress or that relationship information as well. But say you have 3 different stories of building, but they all have the same exact activities as you build up. Well, instead of manually typing out every single activity into a line item, you can copy and paste them throughout the schedule as needed. So for example, I can take our completed schedule, highlight that, I will hold shift and left click down below. I've highlighted all these tasks. I can right click and I can hit copy. And then if I go over here, I can go to construction and I can come and hit paste. So now you can see that I've actually copied all of these tasks directly from here under our construction side. So this is a quick way, but again, it'll kind of copy a little bit more information if you've tracked progress. So just be careful or wary when you're doing this. If you're going to copy and paste, do it when you're building the schedule before you've put in most of your durations or any of your logic ties. So I'm just going to hit Control Z and just back that out. So let's start building this phase 1 of our schedule. So I'm going to insert task. I'm going to change this to phase 1 here. And again, I'm going to create that nested phase. I'm going to just do another one. Although we're only working in phase 1, I'll also create phase 2. I can highlight both of these, change the color. And then for the bulk of this video, like I mentioned, we're going to be working off of the previous video that I made with this series of activities with start, activity A through H, and then our finish. Now our start and our finish are both milestone dates. So to create this schedule from scratch, we're just going to start typing these in one at a time. So I'm just going to do start, insert, activity A, insert, activity B, So the first thing that we would do after adding our task descriptions is to assign task durations, which would be the amount of days to complete each task. Now, these are example activities. but knowing the length of durations of actual construction activities comes with time and experience. For this example, we're going to follow our CPM schedule example for each of these durations. So our activity A and our activity H will all have durations. But if you recall, our start and our finish are milestones. So those would each have 0 durations. So to change the duration of a task, we just click in this duration box and we can change it down to 0 days. So I'm going to change that for the start. I'm going to come down here to the finish and I'm going to do the same. And then for activity A, we have 6 days. So I'm going to change this to 6 days. And before I go on to the next one, if you notice, there's a slight bump to this bar. So this bar is actually now tracking duration on the schedule, but everything has the same start date so far because we haven't created any relationship tie to any of these activities. So there's no logic in the schedule yet. So activity B we see is 3 days. So I'm going to change that to 3. Activity C was 4 days. Activity D also 4 days. Activity E, we have 10 days. Activity F, we have 3 days. Activity G is 2 days. And activity H is 3 days. So you can see that these bars increased, which are reflective of that task duration. And then again, right above is our corresponding calendar. So we get a visual of these task durations. So after adding all the durations, we want to start creating those relationships, which will build the logic in our schedule. To add the relationships, we'll click on the task and we will go up to the details button here. And when you start this up just on a blank schedule, you'll see that it defaults to resources and predecessor name. But we want to talk about predecessors and successors like I did in my previous video. So you can actually just right click here on the side and there's multiple options. I'm going to click predecessors and successors. So I'm just going to pull that down just slightly and then we can get a better overall view of our schedule from scratch, our completed schedule. And we're going to start creating logic now in this schedule. So I'm going to click on this start activity here. And this is where we're going to start to build this logic. For the sake of my previous video, all these relationships are going to be finished to start relationships. I'll show you kind of where this is seen in the scheduling software once we start to populate that. So looking at our CPM diagram, activity A, C, and E are all successors to our start activity. So I'm actually going to be using these corresponding numbers on the left side of the screen to start linking these. So the start activity is actually number 8. Activity A is number 9, and it's a successor. So if I pull this up and I just type in number 9 here and just click off of that, we see that activity A has populated in here as a successor to the start activity, and the relationship type is FS. Again, you can click down here and change that relationship type if you want. So I'm going to finish this up by going to activity C, which is also a successor of our start activity. This is number 11. So if I click on our start and I type in 11, and then I'm also going to do activity E, which is 13. And if I just click off that, then we can see that these are all populated as our successor activities. Now I'm going to click on activity A, which was a successor to our start activity. And when I click on this and I look in this detail section below, we can actually see that that start activity is listed as a predecessor. So the scheduling software has already done this relationship tie. If I go to start, we can see it's a successor. If I click on activity A, we see it's a predecessor. If I go to activity C, we also see the predecessor. And finally, if I click on activity E, we see that last start as our predecessor. So jumping back to A and looking at our CPM diagram, we're going to take a look at what our successor to A is, which is activity B. Now, activity B is number 10 here. So I'm going to go down here while clicked on activity A, and I'm going to click 10, which is corresponding with B. And once I input that, you can see that the successor is there, the predecessor is there. But most importantly, what this has done is created that first bit of logic in our schedule. And you can see that this bar now is showing task A waterfalls into task B. This is a finish to start sequence. So activity A goes and goes, and then once it's done, B can start, which is shown here by this arrow. So I'm going to go through the rest of this and just compare what I have in here to our CPM diagram and input the rest of these values, just going one at a time with activity B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, just adding all these successors. Okay, so I've added all the relationships that we have in our CPM diagram. As I click through, you can kind of see all the predecessors and successors match. Starting with A, we have activity B. With B, we have activity G as the successor. Activity C has both successors, activity D and F. Activity D has the successor as activity G. E, the successor is activity H. F is also the successor of activity H. G, our successor is our finish milestone. H, again, our finish milestone. And I'm going to expand this schedule now, so we can see the full logic or sequence of this schedule from our start, which is listed here. And just a general note, when we have a milestone, it is shown as this diamond by default. And you can change that, but this is just what it sets. Same thing with our finish. We show a 0-day milestone. Okay, so I've expanded this area so that we can see kind of all the information that we wanted to look at: our task name, our duration, our start date, our finish date, our early start, our early finish, our late start, late finish, and total slack. Now, the scheduling software has done all the work automatically, and if I compare the total slack on our Microsoft project schedule, I see that activity A has 2 days, which matches. Also, I can see the activities with 0 float or 0 slack being our critical path, which are start to activity E to activity H to our finish. Another way to see the critical path is if I go to the right side of the screen here, I can actually right click and go down to this show hide bar styles, and I can click on critical tasks. So there we have it. Our critical path is shown in red with this sequence. Our non-critical path is shown in blue as we see above. Also, I can go into that same area, showed hide bar styles, and click on bar styles. And this allows me to create a little more information on the right side of the screen. Everything is fairly customizable in Microsoft Project, similar to P6 or any other scheduling software. So I'm just going to click name here. On the top, I'm going to click total slack. And then down here, I'm going to do percent complete. And then as I mentioned before, that milestone was previously listed as a diamond, but you can change what that looks like on your schedule. I'm going to click OK. And then what has happened is we have now information that I added, such as the name on the left, the total slack on the top, and the percent complete listed within the bar. So if you recall from my first video, every schedule should have a critical path. This is a series of tasks of activities that have zero float, meaning that if you extend those activities, the actual end date extends as well. So for this example, if it takes us 5 days instead of these 3 days to complete activity H, which is on the critical path, I can adjust this by 2 days. We see that the finish date is 10/28 to start. And if I click off this, we see that the overall project date has adjusted by 2 days. If I click that back, it readjusts. And then just as a general note, anytime you click something, any task or activity that's impacted due to a relationship or a logic tie will actually change in blue. So you can see all these impacted dates, times that have been adjusted accordingly. So again, the critical path needs to be monitored throughout the course of the project. So let's say that activity A, which is a non-critical path activity, takes a bit longer. Well, currently we have our 2 days of float or slack, which is our leeway, meaning we can burn up these days and it's not going to impact the overall schedule. But let's say activity A with 6 days takes 7 days to complete. So if I take a look and adjust that, what we've done is we've lost 1 day of float in our sequence here above, and it's been adjusted as 1 day, but the overall end date has not yet changed. Let's adjust activity 8 to 8 days. So now what we've seen is that we've lost that last day of float up here, and now we have 2 critical paths on this project, which means essentially that now activity A and activity B, which is in the same flow or sequence, along with this activity G, have now become critical path. So finally, let's say that activity A takes 9 days to complete. So take a look at this right side here, this 10/28. When I click off, what happens is that this is now the sole critical path, and this original critical path has fallen off, and it's actually picked up a day of float. What has also happened to our project schedule is that it's pushed 1 day, and this still continues to have no float, but any further impact to activity A or any activity on this overall sequence will adjust the overall end date. So if I adjust that back to its original duration, we go back to our original critical path, which I have listed here with our original finish date. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because certain activities can lag for certain reasons on a project, which is why you have to do some active monitoring, adjusting of your schedule throughout the course of construction, because the critical path can change as well. So finally, if I want to publish this schedule, I would just click on this file button. I would go down here to print. I would change this to just a Bluebeam PDF. I would print this as 11 by 17 to kind of capture all that information. And here we go. We see the overall summary side, task name, duration, start finish dates. We see the calendar as a good visual here on the right side. And then on the bottom below, we have our legend, which shows kind of what all these task bars means. You just print this out and you can distribute this to your team. Again, all these footers are customizable. You can create customized headers when you publish this schedule as well. Okay, I hope this was enough information to at least get you started with creating schedules. As I mentioned, most scheduling software does the same thing. Just the navigation tools is going to be something that will change. So regardless, you'll have to spend some time practicing on your own. Just click around, navigate, Google if you need some more information as to how to use the software. And I'll be making future scheduling videos on setting baselines, updating schedules, tracking progress, going further in depth into reporting, and also talk about schedule theory, which is how I would approach a drawing set to turn it into an actual schedule. Now, if this video helped you out, you can support me in this channel by subscribing or dropping a comment below. If you got a question, leave it in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you all. So, as always, be better, build better, and bye for now.